The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello and welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast. This is Chris Shelton, your host. Thank you very much for joining me again this week. We're welcoming back Dr. Mo, Dr. Maurice Turmel. He is an author. He is actually, let me jump to his bio because there's some cred here that I want you all to know about before we get started. He is a doctor in counseling psychology, in addition to having a master's and honors in psychology. He was a practicing therapist for 25 years. Good long time. Provided counseling, therapy, and consulting services around creativity, self-development, spiritual and psychological awareness, and all the things we're going to talk about today. So, Dr. Mo, welcome back to my show.
Great to be here, Chris.
We were talking very briefly before the show, and I said, no, let's do this on mic because you brought up something that I absolutely agree with, which is I think there is a kind of movement, especially here in the United States, perhaps in Europe as well, that is pushing back on the sort of, and recognizing, first of all, the damage, the sort of psychological trauma that comes with abusive religious cultures and practices, and I headline that, or I preface that with abusive religious practices, because this is not an all or nothing thing of all religions bad. I always got to lead with that, but there's so much abuse and trauma generated by nonsensical behavior in religious families, in certain denominations, certain dogmatic principles and rules and guidelines that we see and have talked about with things like the Duggars and Bill Gothard's, IBLP and the evangelical crowd. I've had so many people from the 2x2s and from various evangelical denominations. And of course, on this channel, we talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, which a lot of people think of as very mainstream sort of religious activities because so many people are involved with it, but yet these are abusive practices and they actually hurt people. And so Dr. Mo here is someone who's taken it upon himself to do something about that. And you've recently written a new book, Breaking the Spell of Religion and Healing the Trauma, which is available right here on Amazon. I'm looking right at it. And we're going to talk about that and this topic today. So welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, and it's good to see you again. Yeah,
I think this will be interesting. First off, let's just go ahead and get right into it. Sure. Could you tell us, and we covered some of this in our first interview, but for those who didn't see that, how do you talk about or describe trauma when it comes to religious settings? There's, how does this manifest? What does this look like? And how do we think about it?
The camouflage that religion throws over what they do is hiding something nefarious that was very well uncovered in the 1980s when we started talking about dysfunctional families and dysfunctional family relations. And nobody thought at the time, at least, not that I'm aware of, and myself included, having been brought through the Catholic tradition, that those same things, the levels of understanding of living in a traumatic environment in a family, let's say, led by an alcoholic or an abusive parent or just a negative environment. But all the writing and all the books and all the guests that showed up on Oprah Winfrey were talking about this ad infinitum. And then they were also touching on the spiritual side of life that was kind of hidden in the background. And I know that religion likes to claim that they're open to spirituality or they represent spirituality, but that's not true. It's simply not true. And I'm going to stick to what I understand about Catholicism, what I learned about you from Scientology, from Jehovah's Witnesses, the kind of stuff that I encountered when I was working with people. Is there's a masquerade going on, and it's all about honoring this God that is external to us. Well, let me just shut that down. And a lot of people understand this, and maybe you already have heard this many times. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience, and our spirituality is inherent to who we are. And the best thing and the best quote that came from Jesus of Nazareth, is, "The kingdom is within." And that literally means as we go within and undo the hurt and trauma that we've experienced, we keep uncovering. There's all this talk about getting in touch with the inner child. Mm-hmm. Well, the inner child is the representative of that beautiful innate spirituality that we're all born with. It's just a beautiful white beam, or however you want to visualize it. And we don't need religion as it stands now to access it. What we need is to access our own inner truth. That's the foundation. So what religion does is it presents itself as a gatekeeper. Like, when you're crossing a border, you got to go and answer questions before you're allowed inside another country. All right? Well, they're presenting themselves as a gatekeeper to this empire, to this beautiful state of spiritual awareness, when in fact it already exists within us. And the real way to get there is to heal all of those wounds that were not unlike the wounds that people suffered in that dysfunctional family environment. In this case, the dysfunctional family is the abuse of religion. That's the dysfunctional family. Putting itself in charge of, and you know this intimately, controlling people, just controlling people. And however your awakening came to you, something inside lit you up. You know this for a fact. You felt it. There's another important word. You feel your own truth. But first you got to feel that pain, because that pain is covering that beautiful innate spiritual self that we are, that beautiful energy. It's energy, right? So it doesn't have to be somebody floating in a chair and passing judgment on us. It doesn't have to be that. It's here, and we're all part of it. In fact, the more you get in touch with it, when I go for walks now, I say hello to the trees. I say hello to the bushes. I say hello to all the plant life. I say hello to any of the creatures that are running around, because we're all imbued with this beautiful energy. And I feel like I'm still waking up to this vista of I call it not only therapeutic energy, but spiritual energy that defines us as beautiful, nascent, just beautiful people, beautiful, innocent people, as opposed to being sinners and guilt and shame and that dogma that we got shoved on our throats over and over and over again. You grew up in it. I grew up in it. When you're living in it, you don't have any idea. This is normal. And they tell you those other religions are wrong. They're evil. They're bad. Whatever. So okay, yeah, we believe that too. But in the 70s, when I went through a broken marriage, and I needed help because I couldn't make sense of my own life. I was only in my 20s. I had 2 children, and my wife at the time was unhappy, but we weren't clicking. So I found my way to this medical doctor who was dabbling in the psychology of the times. And my first book was "I'm Okay, You're Okay." A lot of people will remember that.
I remember that.
An onslaught of books through the 70s. That woke me up, and that's what sent me into the university realm to learn more and more about psychology. And for me, I thought it was about personal growth. But I began to realize along the way, and even as I became a therapist, I began to realize that I had I had more of my own healing to do. And as that became a norm for myself, I was better at helping people work through their healing and walking them through their therapeutic adventure. And when they were done with me, they weren't done with their process. They went on and read more books and did their own thing. And because now it's a path of self-discovery. And there's a fire inside when you grab onto that. When you started lighting up and seeing the obstacles in front of you with your Scientology stuff, and you started grabbing onto the light that whatever represented your own awakening, you're a perfect example of what I've gone through and what people are going through right now. So
yeah, I agree.
That's my story at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many things to ask you about there, and thank you for that. Let's go ahead and take a look specifically at religious trauma. I would love it if, as a result of this, people could walk away thinking and understanding that concept better, because I think some people struggle with it. What? But religion is belief. Religion is pacifistic. Religion is about helping people. Religion is charity. It's all these things they associate with it, and they're not necessarily wrong in doing that. And yet it also has, there's kind of two sides to this coin. And we have this trauma that can come from this experience. And I don't know that it comes from somebody telling you, well, this is how to believe, because, people will say, well, you don't have to believe that. But there's a little bit more to it, isn't there?
Yeah. For those of us born into it, Chris, it's your normal life. It's the reality of life as your parents have lived it, and as you're being introduced to it. So all of these things, you don't have what I call the self-reflective capacity yet. You're a child, and you're absorbing this stuff. But if we understand child abuse and childhood trauma, it's easy to understand the trauma effect of an alcoholic parent yelling at, screaming at, or striking their children. We understand that as a trauma, just like we understand the trauma of these young men and women who went to war in Vietnam and came home with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So we understand that. But as we mature, and if I recall correctly, you were in that environment for almost 20 years, a couple of decades, before something lit up inside. And the key to unraveling that, first of all, you've got this identity as a faith-oriented, belief-oriented individual, and definitions of you are in Catholicism. You were born with original sin, and so sin is a big factor. And every mistake, for crying out loud, is a sin. It's absolutely absurd, as opposed to just life experience. When I introduce this idea to people, I say, go to a hospital in the natal unit and look at those babies and tell them they have original sin. How are you going to feel when you say that? It's absurd, right?
Yeah.
But when you're indoctrinated, right, Chris, you know that.
Oh,
when
yeah.
you're indoctrinated, this is the norm. It's not the norm. Now that we have literature and examples, all kinds of examples, the self-help movement has helped awaken a lot of stuff. Then there's the awakening of, I've been traumatized. I've been defined as a negative, broken, or spiritually unaware individual. And the only way through this, according to religion, is to be perfect. You're going to have a chance in hell. It's impossible. It's impossible. But you belong to the club, and the club says you're a sinner, and you can resurrect yourself, or you can redeem yourself if you follow all the rules. But when you slip up and it's a minor thing, you're a sinner. So, you're trying to be perfect, which is impossible, rather than being self-accepting, which is necessary. So then the hurt starts to come. So let me give you a simple example. My father was physically abusive, and I got a terrible beating at age 5. I thought he was going to kill me. And I buried it all. And this is what we do with trauma. We bury it. And okay, so now what do I got to do? I'm a child, okay? What do I got to do? I got to understand this guy, and I got to tippy-toe around him, because I don't want him to go off again, because somehow, even though he attacked me, it was my fault. I did something wrong. I don't know. I ate an orange, or I took something out of the fridge, or I walked too far down the street. I did something wrong. So you transfer that into the religious sphere, and what have you done wrong? Well, this is a sin, that's a sin, that's a sin. Your sexual orientation, what you're supposed to hold back until you're married, and then your marriage is forever because they say so. All of these bachelor guys say that this marriage is forever because they know about it. No, they don't. Of course they don't. It's absurd. All right. Meantime, as long as you're going to be a good Christian now, you're a good Christian, don't forget to put money in the pot, because that's what keeps the business going. All right?
Sure.
But when the realization, you had it, I've had it, and people are having it. Holy okay, do I feel this? Do I feel negative about myself? Do I feel like a loser? Do I feel like I'm always wrong? These are the questions that I would ask in a therapy session. Tell me what you feel. I feel bad. I feel darkness around me. Well, then you've been traumatized. And that feeling is kind of the surface manifestation of hurt. And when you don't have to invent hurt. All you just have to do is breathe and feel it, right? And you know what hurt is. But what's underneath the hurt? Anger. Because they called me names, because they put me down, because my abusive father beat me. Anger. But you're not allowed to be angry at the church. You're not allowed to vent any of this stuff because it's a sin, right? So that's double bind. There's a beautiful example of a double bind. But
perfect.
Go ahead.
You keep beating me to all the things I'm going to ask you about. It's awesome. I love this. Because I think I was going to go exactly to that sinner point, because it's a point you make in your book, and it has to do. I tie it immediately into a sort of label that is a lifelong label that you could give someone as a child and tie it to their identity. And psychologically, there's a whole thing in psychology about identity and identity theory, and how to address identity issues. And this touches over into the gender stuff and the sexual stuff, but it also ties in with religion when we start labeling people sinner. And there's a whole slew of characteristics or ideas that can come with this, that I shouldn't be happy, that I should be living a life of atonement and propitiation to this ephemeral spiritual being that I've never, seen or heard, or I'm supposed to hear him in my head. And so we're going to encourage, frankly, audio hallucinations. I mean, we're going to go into all of this, all this baggage that comes with it. And this is sort of, part of this whole religious trauma package. And could you speak more to that in terms of the identity issues of that?
So initially, as you've got good descriptions, Chris.
Thank you.
You may not be a psychologist, but you are a psychologist. You've got good descriptions and understanding of these dynamics. That's what they are. Yeah. So that identity that we're born into for those of us, who've come through whatever religious path it was. It's tied to what our parents believe, and it's tied to what our community believes and accepts, and it's only later in life when we become, and we allow ourselves to become self-reflective, because that's the first thing that has to happen, to ask that question: why do I feel this way? Why do I feel hurt or resentment towards that person or our parent or even that religion or those nuns that taught me in school and schooled me? That kind of stuff. You start asking, and what I'm teaching people, and what I'm wanting people to begin to understand is self-reflection is the first step to uncovering the truth of your own being. Now, this may sound like a big thing, but because it's inside you, because, let's say, and you like the idea of the inner child. It's more than a concept. You can actually feel that child and what that child felt at certain key moments in life when they were schooled or addressed or put down or cast as sinner. And when you get it, you start to get in touch with that. And my favorite tool, and I probably mentioned it to you before, and it's in the book. At home, journaling, write it down. What am I feeling now? And whatever it is, write it down. Right now, you're having, there's a time when you do your self-reflection that you need the more advanced people or books. You need them to help you self-reflect, to help you look inside yourself and to see the things that they're pointing out to you. Because the thing that when you're in pain or when you're feeling down about yourself or your value, and why am I always feeling like I'm not good enough? And that's a repetitive thing that got conditioned and conditioned and conditioned. Well, now you can ask that question: where's that coming from? And when you start to unpack those layers, they're layers of trauma. They're not just one big package. They're layers. So you start to unpack them, and oh my goodness, when you get through a layer, you have a nice deep breath, right? You know that, right?
Well,
you have a nice deep breath, and it's just, and what if the breath was you screamed because you just felt that rage for a moment? As long as you don't pull out a gun, as long as you don't go whacking people with a baseball bat, you scream or write it down or whatever you need to do that's safe to get it out. You need to do that to let those feelings out. And then you begun your conversation with the inner you, that little guy that showed up and was in that neonatal place and was basically a brand new package and beautiful and innocent in every sense of the word, until he started or she started having things piled on her. You're going to get back to that part of you. And for those people who like the perception of the connecting with the inner child, that's what you're recovering. You're recovering your own inner self, your own innocent self. Because the ultimate goal of recovery, you're going to cry out your trauma, you're going to scream out your trauma because you're feeling it. And that's a good thing. And you're going to go through different things, and then you're going to breathe for a while. And then, a few weeks later, a few months later, who knows when, but something else is going to come up and say, oh, I got to have a look at that. Well, now you're developing the pattern of looking within. All right, so you pull out your journal or you go talk to your favorite therapist, whatever works for you. We're going to unpack the next layer and the next layer and the next layer. And that way it comes out safely, as opposed to one nuclear explosion where people go, with guns or other weapons and go crazy and attack the people who attack them. Unpacking things in layers, it's safer, and it also, each step inspires the next step. You know this. You took a big step when you pulled the plug on where you were. and you started looking at Chris and what he needed and what didn't feel right. Do you remember, Chris? You've told me this. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel right. And that's when your truth started coming through. That was your breakthrough. That was your breakthrough. And here you are sharing what you've learned. Here I am, an ex-Catholic, a recovering Catholic. Here I am sharing what I've learned. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't look through a college outline and saying, "Oh, this looks like a nice career." No, I had to go there because I was in pain and I needed help, and I got help. I got help from great people. I got help from great books, I think his name was Richard Harris that did "I'm Okay, You're Okay." Okay, Carl Rogers came along. Carl Rogers from Wisconsin, but client-centered therapy in my business, Carl Rogers is a giant. Client-centered therapy, basically helping people to feel what they're feeling in the moment that they're sharing that with you. And then that gets them deeper and deeper into what's nagging at them, what's hurting them. Well, my fourth year supervisor was a student of Carl Rogers. He came from Wisconsin. He came to Canada. He came to this, it's not a little university anymore, and he was appointed the director of the counseling center. So he took me, my medical doctor took me to a point, but when I hooked up with, his name was David Jordan, I hooked up with him, he took me further, and actually he helped launch me towards, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to become a therapist. But I didn't even know that it was possible. But it was the constant uncovering and discovering that just kept the momentum going. And when people uncover and discover for themselves, ergo self-reflection, what's going on with me? What do I need? What am I feeling? I'm pissed off. I'm angry as hell. Whatever it is, write it down, tell somebody, see your therapist if you still need that. And I've been journaling for 30 years. I'll journal till the day I die. It cleanses me. 10 minutes a day. That's it. And my inner self then says, hey, that feels good. I'm glad we got that out, Like you felt when you said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. It feels wrong. You know what a moment that was. That's huge. Oh, it's
gigantic.
Huge.
Gigantic. That's right.
So self-reflection. The next one is, well, if you're self-reflecting, then you begun self-accepting. And when you self-accept, that means because you have to accept your pain, right? You have to accept your trauma, right? And you're allowing yourself to feel what you naturally buried at the moment of crisis and trauma. You buried it because you had no other tools, no other references other than to shove it down and wrap it in something because you were already told those feelings are wrong. Those feelings are bad. You can't think badly of our religion or whatever it was, or your parents. So you're bad. No, now you're unpacking that. Well, then self-acceptance. The third one is self-love. I never heard the words from my parents or from any church people. I never heard the phrase, I love you, ever. Not till my mother was in her late 40s, then she started saying it.
Wow.
I never heard it from my father. I never heard it from my father. My sisters and I, we grew up in this home, and my parents were indoctrinated in Catholicism. We say it to each other all the time now. We say it to our children who are young adult children. They say it back. Now that's become a normal part of who I am. It's a normal part of my daughters and their children. It's a normal part of my grandchildren. And these exchanges of affection and acceptance, right? This is a whole new world now. At the individual level, as we unpack that nascent, innocent self that we were when we arrived here, we were not defective. We did not have original sin. That's BS. Okay. We arrived here. All we needed, and good parenting is nurturing. And it's not just showering kids with, positive stuff. The phrase tough love. Tough love is, hey, No, you can't do that. You can't do that because that can harm you or harm someone else, as opposed to you're defective, as opposed to you're defective. No, no, no. That behavior, not you, that behavior is not correct, not acceptable, because it can hurt you and can hurt other people. But you're still a lovable, adorable person. All right? So, and then we become self-monitoring, self-reflecting, self-correcting, right? Because now the path up the hill is way more pleasurable. We're not fighting monsters on our way up anymore, and all of these things that religion piled on us, all of these guilt trips, shame. God, the worst thing that you can do to a child, and I've experienced it, and I'm sure you have, is to shame them, because you just shrink, right? You just shrink, and shaming means you're defective, as opposed to, hey, that wasn't a good idea what you did or said to that person. That wasn't a good idea. So reflect on
the good points. Those are very good points. I really appreciate that 3-layer approach there with the self-reflection and self-awareness, and sort of stripping away the denial, that we use to bury this stuff. It's just denial. And there's a mechanism there that you mentioned earlier that I'd like you to talk a bit more about, which is this concept of double binds. Because I think that's sort of the mechanical way of understanding how we create or have created for us situations that we can't mentally escape from. We can't figure our way out of them, because there's this thing called a double bind. And what is that in psychological terms, and what would be examples of that in the kind of trauma we're talking about with religion?
So let's say some a religion teacher, or whether in a school situation, or as you attend mass or church or whatever, and they tell you that you're defective, but God will forgive you if you do what we tell you to do. Now, if your own innocence has been buried, well, I mean, indoctrination is this is how the system works. So the ultimate message is, I mean, as we try and deduce what's going on, okay, I can't do that. That makes me defective, or that, and the shame thing is really, it's like the bubble wrap that wraps around you. Okay, so now I'm as a therapist, I'm saying these things need to be challenged. But if you go and challenge that priest or that nun face to face, they're going to tell you you're committing a sin because you're challenging me. Mm-hmm. So I'm telling you that you're bad and defective, and you're going to challenge me. That makes you more defective, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why we have to come back to our self state and self-reflection, and having, let's call it, the amicable or trustworthy relationship of someone who's neutral. As an example, Carl Rogers would say, so how do you feel about that? So in your head now you're hearing this for the first time. You mean I can talk about my feelings? Every time I talk about my feelings, they tell me I'm wrong. Yes, religion told you were wrong. So religion is saying that I need to be this, and this, but they're doing all these negative things to me. And when I bring it up to them and I challenge them, then they tell me I'm wrong for bringing it up to them and challenging them. So how can I be, if I'm not wrong, then, I mean, it's a monster now.
That's right. That's right.
I'm where do I go? And that's what drives people. Those are double binds. I'm wrong if I challenge them, but I'm wrong if I accept what they say. So as a child, you're going to accept it. And as you said, you're going to bury the anger, resentment, and all of those reactive feelings, which are normal feelings when you're being attacked, when you're being challenged or hurt. When it's coming from someone who's delivering it in a negative perspective, regardless of all their treatise of what's right and what's beautiful and what's gracious and what religion requires of you, you still, okay, well, the best I can do is maybe have a good moment where, I do something right, but that doesn't make me correct. That doesn't make me healthy or positive. It means I've got, one good score on the scorecard, because you're always just one step away, one mistake away from being back in the hole, because that's the
Exactly.
umbrella. That's the umbrella.
Yeah.
So, do this, but don't do what I do. But, do this, but don't do what I do. Well, then what do I do? Then you're left with the only, I must be wrong. I must be broken. I must be defective. Well, see, now you can seek redemption, and we'll help you. Now we'll help you. Because now that you know that you're defective, you belong to us. That's
exactly.
Religion.
And yet it's these mechanisms, these double binds, that are sort of making you defective. And when I first learned about this, this was the work of Dr. Gregory Bateson many, many years ago, these double binds. And this was actually research that was being done on what creates psychosis. And, these are heavy, that's a heavy duty term, right, for a heavy duty condition. And when you think about how you can put somebody in a kind of a mental prison, a psychological prison of, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. Quite literally, that's the makeup or the model of it, right?
Yep.
And I think a lot of us respond to that by, sort of working out how we're at fault, and as you just described, and we sort of build this, these walls of around ourselves and deny, because a lot of this is being done with children. And when you're doing this to a child, they are not a mature mind. They are not emotionally developed. They are not critically thinking about things. They've not had enough life experience to be able to do so. And of course, this is mostly coming from authority figures, which piles on a whole nother layer of awful to this. But that crazy making part is something that I don't think is something to just brush under the, I bring this up because I think that this is very powerful levels of or ways of indoctrination, if you will, right? Or ways of getting people trapped mentally. And I think a lot of the religious trauma that we see, this, the guilt and the blame and the shame and the internal constant questioning of self, come from this, right? And can literally drive people a little nuts sometimes. Could you comment on that? Am I describing this properly?
I'm just going to have some water.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dry.
Yeah. No problem.
Here's the thing. 20, 30 years ago, we had no problem identifying cults, the Moonies, and all these very visible cults.
Yeah.
And religion was happy to define them as these dangerous, crazy things.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that religion cultivates as well, and has all those same characteristics, right? It has all those same characteristics, but it's been so well buried and camouflaged under these layers and layers of self-righteousness and goodness and piety and ta-da. That's why when you see an abusive, addicted parent abusing children, it's so easy to identify the source of the problem. When it's all camouflaged under these layers of piety and goodness and God and angels, whatever, it's the proverbial double bind. But when someone like me and someone like you says, do you know what a cult is? Like the ones we've already identified, the Moonies, and what they do to people, because they show up in the news. Take a look at your religion. Take a look at your religion and see if you can see some of those patterns that they delivered to you. And this is where people, and you had it, I've had it, you have that aha experience. Oh my God, Oh my God. And that comes, first of all, you have to be open to the idea that the possibility. All right. But for the longest time, if you and I went and said, oh, Catholicism is a cult or Scientology is a cult, we'd be shot at. The repercussions, the backlash would be so severe. How dare I say Catholicism is a cult? It is, and I dare say it. And it takes that awareness. You had yours, I had mine. It takes that awareness to know, oh my God, this is. So it's the same awareness, like, okay, my father is an alcoholic and a physically abusive person. So, because this in these kinds of families, dysfunctional families, the children will keep making excuses for what their father is doing because the father or the parent operates on the basis that the children are at fault. And when you did that, I blew up and I hit you. So it was your fault. So the child, and it's easy for children to absorb responsibility. Well, it's easy for children to absorb what the religion is teaching them. But when you show them later in life, and you have to be later in life, you have to be in your young adulthood or early adulthood to begin to self-reflect, then you have those aha moments like you've had and I've had. Oh my goodness, I did belong to a cult, Even 20 years ago, I wasn't sure. I didn't think about it. I certainly knew about dysfunctional family dynamics. I grew up in one.
Right.
And it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all bad. We have a loving mother, and our father was, what they called a good provider. And basically, that's how he saw his job. But he came from an environment. Well, I'm sure he was never told he was loved, and my mother never heard it because my mother later on in life started saying so, and she said she realized. So she's now in her 40s and late 40s. I'm in my 20s, and she's starting to tell me that she loves me. And it's awkward at first, but she's also saying, I wish I could have done this for you earlier on, like when you were growing up. But she never heard it. We never heard it. And like I said before, now our children are hearing it. But when you identify the source of the trauma, or you have that realization that, oh my God, if I'm stuck in a double bind, I can't be wrong whichever way I go. There has to be a right way and a wrong way. And if I'm not wrong, then that person or that system is wrong. And if the child realizes my father is a violent, abusive person, that changes the dynamic, and that child, maybe young person, will stop absorbing responsibility and making excuses for them. And when you start coming out of the indoctrination of religion, you stop making excuses for them, and you stop buying into, well, I'm defective. No, you're not. No, you're not. You were taught to believe that, but no, you're not. That beautiful, innocent part of you is there. And he's going to scream at you sooner or later. If you're listening, he's going to scream at you and say, pay attention. I got things to tell you. So you can't absorb the negativity anymore. And that's when you break free. Now you're going to need help in forms of books or information, podcasts, people like you and me sharing these ventures, these experiences, and pointing out to that brighter future. It says, hey, you're a good, beautiful person. You arrived on this planet innocently, and now you're going to restore that. You're going to unpack all those layers that you buried, all of that hurt, shame, and trauma. You're going to see the sources for what they were, and you can do it one step at a time. Doesn't have to happen overnight. But as you see it, the negativity inside you towards you diminishes. The love starts to grow. Oh my God, I can accept myself as that. Then you realize, I like being generous to people. I like complimenting people. I like hugging people. I love pets. I love petting pets. I love expressing my feelings, my emotions. That must be who I am, or that's more of who I am. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful discovery. It's a beautiful discovery. So when I'm delivering my message to people is believe in yourself, and here are some tools to help you get there, to help you unpack the damage, to help you unpack the trauma, to help you heal the wounds, and to get to that part of you, your inner child, or whatever you want to call it, and bring her out, bring him out, and honor them, and build them up, and build them up, and do it whatever pace suits you, and unpack those things. And when you feel anger rising in you, write it down or put a pillow over your face and scream your head off. Let it out, because you were hurt, you were traumatized. Trust what you're feeling. That's the message. Trust yourself. And now that you can trust yourself and you wipe away all that stuff that they piled on you, well, who am I now that I don't have to carry that anymore? That I don't have to caretake that broken and defective and abusive father of mine, or that broken and defective religion that I was brought up in? That I don't have to make excuses for their behavior. I don't have to take ownership of what they taught me about being defective. That's on them. That stuff belongs to them, not to me. I'm taking care of me. Self-reflection, self-acceptance, self-love. And you don't have to do it. It comes as you unpack these things. The natural feeling of caring about yourself and your value and your contribution, what you're going to share with the world, it comes because it's natural. It's who you are. The kingdom is within. The kingdom is within.
Well, let me ask, there's this word religion, and we've certainly been bandying it about here. We're talking about religious trauma and the religious this and religious that. And I think that the word itself is a very loaded word. And I think it creates its own levels of confusion with people. And I'll tell you why. And you tell me what you think of this. There are three concepts wrapped up in this word religion. And I think that people get them really confused one with another whenever this is discussed. Yeah. There's religious belief. There's the personal religious belief that you carry around with you, which is your religion. And there is the religious practice of what you do, to the actions, the praying, to the going to the church, to the reading scriptures or reading your dogma or coming up with your own, or whatever it is that is Wicca is dancing around in the forest or whatever people do. Sure. But this is the practice of it, which is separate from what's going on in your head, which is more of the belief system, right? And then we come to the third aspect of it, which is, I think, the one we've really been pretty down on here today, which is the organized religion. This something that's not within you or part of you, but it's something you partake in. It's the church, it's the institution, it's the dogma, it's the rules, it's all the guidelines. And that's, I try to separate that from religious practice, because religious practice is what you're doing, right? Your prayers, your rituals, your own personal stuff. But what's mandated to you, the dress codes and the sexual rules and the this is what you need to do, the gatekeeping into, on your way to heaven, right? Oh, no. You don't get a free pass. You got to go through us, and we're going to be the ones to tell you. And this is where it becomes organized religion, when groups of people get together and start talking about, what they need to do. And I think an awful lot of trauma comes out of, from what you've been describing here today, from this organized religion aspect of this. And I bring all this up only to try to tear these three things apart so that we can kind of differentiate, at least as I see it, the overbearing, authoritarian, tyrannical sort of nonsense that goes on in our world that we read about, hear about all the time, right? Whether it's the prosperity gospel, preachers ripping people off or flying around on their airplanes and taking advantage of people, to trying to tear down the wall between church and state, which is, a whole evangelical, kind of movement right now. And government interference and laws and let's do this is the organized religion part that I think a lot of people take exception to, but it becomes confused in people's minds with, well, but then I have my own belief, and you're saying my belief is wrong when you say religion is wrong, and they confuse these things. And at least this is how I see people get confused about this. And I think this barriers, kind of gets in the way of people achieving a self-reflection. What are they reflecting on? Are they reflecting on their own personal belief, or are they reflecting on the traumatizing actions of priests and nuns beating on them and calling that part of their religious practice, right? Or the organized part of it? And these things, they get all confused because we use that same word. I think this is an English problem. Maybe it exists in other languages too, but because we combine these three things into this one word, I think this really messes people up. So that's my big stump speech on that. But what's your take on what I just said?
Well, you have very perceptive ways of contexting these things and describing them. And what you're describing is the comfort zone of the institution and the indoctrination process within it, and the comfort that, despite the fact that people typically feel bad about themselves, the comfort of belonging to something that tells you what to do.
Right.
And as long as people are comfortable with that, that's fine, and they're going to stay there. And for some people, like you and I were brought up in certain systems, but some people come to religions later on for those very reasons, because there's comfort there. And the scary part about what you and I are talking about is this emancipation and eviction of ourselves from that system. Well, then that means I'm all alone. Where do I belong? I don't have this umbrella, this thing called religion, to take care of me, to comfort me. I don't have these people I can go running to, and I'm being told I have to rely more on myself. There is growing communities of spiritually oriented individuals. For example, the website called Recovering from Religion has got thousands, if not millions, of subscribers now. And people are there sharing their trauma, sharing their experiences. People who've lived what you and I have lived, and they're still working on it, but they're there on a regular basis. It means that there's a way out. And the so-called promised land, what I believe I'm describing, what you and I are living more so than we did, 30, 40 years ago, is the self-emancipation, but the discovery of this beautiful spirituality that is innate in us and connects us to everything. Why do I go and talk to trees? Is he nuts? No, of course I'm not nuts. They're alive. They're imbued with energy. Flowers. Are you kidding? Your heart doesn't jump when you see beautiful flowers? What, a bird chirping in a tree? A cardinal? So rare, these beautiful birds. A child laughing and giggling, running around just naturally, right? This is beautiful stuff. It's innate in us. And we are connected to the web of life. We are connected to all of these energy systems. We are connected. So we're not alone. I know that's the scary part, and that's what keeps people in the indoctrinated forum. Okay, if you're comfortable there, then stay there. They'll tell you what to do and tell you how to feel. And if that suits you, then that's your choice. But if it doesn't feel right to you anymore, if you feel like there's more to you, and if you like the idea of really setting yourself free, then look at what we're talking about, read some books, and learn about little practices like journaling.
Well,
And
and yeah, let me go right on that, because
yeah,
I was going to bring this up next, and we talked about journaling last time too, and I've
yeah,
encouraged it in people that I consult with or work with, and I again, I don't pretend to do therapy. That's not my point. But I know that writing stuff down for myself, I've written thousands of words, and and not privately. I make it all public, but it is been a form of research, and a way of like getting my feelings out, in a way of unburdening an awful lot of
yeah,
emotional,
yeah,
denial, and that built up over the years. I
yeah,
have recently come to learn again that the very, very powerful force of art, and
yes,
right, and how what a force it is for ourselves individually as well as for society, because it's both a reflection of the society itself, and the culture in which we live. The art that we create reflects our society back to it,
yeah,
but it's also a way for us to progress the society forward by presenting ideas and creating things. It's creation, and I think that's where the magic of it is. And it really, it's a word I kind of love to connect with art, is the magic of it, because there's nothing else like it. Creating things is just it's a tremendous thing. And so I know there's art therapy, and a lot of different modes of that. People can paint, or they can write, or they can draw, or they can make little things out of clay, or they can do whatever they're going to do in terms of art therapy. But I always put it out there as like, hey, whatever creation you can accomplish, go for it, because that's, if there's anything that's bringing that inner child out, and allowing it to express itself, it is that drive of creativity that we have within us, if we have such a drive. And I don't know that I've ever met a human being who isn't into creating things of some kind or another, wherever they direct that energy, or those ideas, whether it's rebuilding cars, whether it's
yeah,
painting a painting, whether it's building Lego, whether it's writing a book, whether it's all these different things. That the point is, the core of it is create. And I wanted to ask you, as somebody who has had decades of therapeutic experience and knowledge with this, right? Like, I'm coming at it from a more of a, yeah, art, create, right? What do you, again, what are your thoughts about all that?
Chris, you're hitting the nail right on the head.
Oh, cool.
That releasing that child.
Yeah.
Now that child, the more they become that part of us, but the more it becomes unburdened from all these untruths that it's been saddled with. Then that creative fountain that's been bubbling inside, or that's there and present, it starts to surface, and all of a sudden, hey, I love art, I love painting, or I love sculpting, or um, I like working with wood, or I love to sing, and I'll sing in the bathtub, I'll sing in the shower, and I'll go to places where people are singing, and maybe I'll get a karaoke machine and I'll sing at home, and maybe I'll go on America's Got Talent and I'll sing. But that's the natural fountain, the beautiful creativity.
Yeah.
I have two hobbies. One is working with wood. Um, I make lawn furniture. I don't do it like I used to. I loved building things. I did it as a child. I built stuff.
Yeah.
When I was a child, I built, well, you call them go-karts, but they were the kind you pushed on the street. It had one big long board in the front with a screw and a bolt that held it in the middle, and you put your feet on it for steering. And there was a place to sit, and somebody was pushing you. There was a place to stick a stick, and somebody was pushing you at the back. Well, I built stuff like that. And then in my teen years, I graduated to, well, I built I built a shed when I was 9 years old. It fell apart a year later. It wasn't very sturdy, but the one that I built when I was 12, it turned into a dollhouse for my sisters. I have 4 sisters, and they moved in, and it was in the back of the yard. And this was something my father could accept. My father was skilled in these areas, and he liked to see me or his sons do stuff that were important and skills that he already possessed himself. So, anyways, I did that, and then later on, over the years, I I tried stained glass for a while, and that was fun, but it was too mechanical for me. I liked working with wood, but my biggest dream has always been, and it still is, creating music. And I create music. I write songs, and I have songs all about waking up inside, all about our spiritual nature. The words inspiration, to be filled with spirit. It's exactly what you described, to be filled with spirit.
Oh, so, good call.
Yeah.
Good call. That's right. Not
only are we unpacking and healing wounds, but wait a minute. And Chris, you brought it up. I'm glad you did. Wait a minute. Now there's this, wow, what if I did that? What if I did that? What if I did that? I have a song called Dreamer. And it's about that. It's about seeing yourself doing different things or trying different things. You know, because the voice inside says, hey, let's give it a try. Let's give this a try. You know, it says let's give this a try. And so, yeah, you do. So you go get some pencils and pens or you know, whatever, a kit or something. You go get it and you start to fuss with it. That part of you starts to come out. Well, where does she want to go? What does he want to do? You know, whether it's a hobby or, my goodness, what if it went from, hey, maybe I can sing to, I'm gonna take my songs and I'm gonna go on America's Got Talent for the next year. And these people at America's Got Talent or Canada's Got Talent, they try to emphasize the fact that people are there to win for the money. As soon as you stand on that stage, you've won, because you've put yourself there. You've won. And now you're expressing that beautiful creative part of you, exactly as you say. So we've seen people, singing and dancing, they're obvious things, playing a musical instrument, but we've seen people do sand art right on the stage in 2 minutes to create something. The camera's on top. Oh my God, they're creating a scene, and they're doing it right in front of our eyes. It's astonishing, but that's a natural, when we're unburdened, when we're free to express who we are, anything's possible. Anything's possible. Anything's possible. Right. Yeah.
I find it to be incredibly therapeutic, and not necessarily requiring, that you have to have some professional standing there telling you what to do. Just create, just get out there and do it. I have found it to be an incredibly healing thing, and so I encourage it in any direction.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's because that's your soul. That's that part of you, that part of you that wants to give, wants to show, wants to share, wants to express. Well, now, as you heal those wounds and get past all that trauma, you have permission to be yourself. And as an adult, you can give yourself permission. As soon as you see behind the masquerade that religion has presented you with, and you begin to see the power and the beauty of your own natural self, your own inspired self, you're on a path of discovery now. And what are you going to do with what you're creating? You're going to share with everybody. And people are going to say, I didn't know you could do that. And why do you do that? Because it feels good. And if it can help people, bonus. If I can sell some handmade chairs, bonus. But it makes me feel good to do this. It makes me feel good to dance or to sing or to create that art, whatever it is you're doing. It feels good. Well, that's medicine. If I'm doing things that make me feel good, you're doing things that make you feel good. This is who we are at that inside level, and that's spirituality. So
that's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point I can connect with you on that in terms of that spirituality, because I agree. And and bringing it back to that word inspiration is just brilliant. I just love that. Dr. Mo, I'm going to wrap up right now because I think we've covered some very salient, very important points today. I don't want to overload people. I think we've covered, between double binds and religious trauma and differentiating, where that trauma comes from versus, having ideas or beliefs. There's nothing wrong with having ideas or beliefs at all. That ain't the problem, right? That's just, it's when people are overbearing, dominating, and overwhelming your psychology with these double binds and this nonsense is where we get traumatic and even physical violence, right, is where we get the trauma from. And that's what we don't want. That shouldn't be part of this whole experience. And unfortunately, for far too many people in this world, it is. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Spirituality, plain and simple, Chris, and you and I have underlined it, is just the freedom to be who we are naturally. And, some of us are late bloomers. I was in my 70s and 80s, and I'm 80 now, but I started in 1997. I said, I'd like to sing the blues. And 25, 27 years later, I've written, maybe 100 songs. And they have a blues flavor to them. Because why the blues? Because the blues is about feeling. And my heroes were people like B.B. King and all these, and Chicago is full of these beautiful, great artists. And the Rolling Stones came to Chicago to absorb that, but it's beautiful feeling music. And you see it in what you call the black culture, the African American culture. You see that there. It's feeling. And they demonstrate that liberation, that feeling, and that sharing of those emotions. And when you may not be let's say, a musician, but your favorite song touches something in your own heart and awakens something in your heart, and you have to hear it again and again and again, and then another one comes along. But every piece of art, whether it's music or painting or dancing, if it inspires you, then you make your own. We're contributing to the whole. So now we're just a bunch of flowers that are finally blooming.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, again, folks out there, if you want to check this out and look more into what we've been talking about today and check out Dr. Mo's work, the latest book, Breaking the Spell of Religion and Healing the Trauma, available on Amazon. If people wanted to reach out to you directly, is there a way for them to do so?
My emails are in the descriptions of the books.
Great.
So, you pass this on. If you can't afford the book, you contact me and I will send you a digital copy.
There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
I'm here to help. Yeah, I'm here to help. And I'm going to be listing a link to my music, which I'm more ready to let it show now. I've been holding it to myself, but I'm ready to let it show now, and I'll send you the link to my Bandcamp site, and you go check it out and see what it does for you. But that's where my creativity is, and if you got stuff to show, send it to me. All right, so I'll email you, and you can email me back, and yeah.
Will do. All right, I mean, it's pretty much my channel.
But this is a beautiful thing, Chris. You're such a good example of what we're talking about. And You've come through this trial in your own life. You awoke, and something inside you said, I got to start telling people about this, that this is important to get past this. This is important to discover who you are. It's important to believe in yourself, and I'm emphasizing that with you, as you, and you're a terrific example. Emphasizing that. It's important to believe in you. And simply put, Jesus said it. The kingdom is within. That's what it means. It's right here. It's right here.
Excellent. Excellent.
You and I are encouraging people to trust themselves and take a few chances. Get a little creative, get a little crazy, have some fun.
Exactly. And on that happy note, folks, we're going to wrap up for this week. Thank you very much for coming around and watching us. And I hope you got something out of this. As always, we always want it to be entertaining, informative, and educational. And I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.